welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for being with us this Sunday evening. We are mixing it up a little bit on Everyday Orthodox, and so I've already missed my first cue, so there you go. But we're going to do shorter intros and just get to the point, because I think that's more fun, frankly. So here we are. Welcome. We are here every Sunday night to meet another everyday Orthodox Christian. And tonight, I'm really excited about our guest. But before I tell you who it is, I want to tell you that you are able to watch us on YouTube so that you can see our happy faces. You can also comment on YouTube. You can send us little messages. We are also on the AFR app. We are streaming on the Ancient Faith site. We also, of course, are on Facebook Live on the Ancient Faith Ministries page. And you can go in and hear archived episodes of the show. If you miss a live episode, no problem. Just go on the app, go on the YouTube channel, and you will find us and be able to listen later. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so happy that you're here because we love to just get together and meet someone new every week. And you know, a couple months ago, I think back in May, maybe, we had a guest named Yam Burke. And he was actually an iconographer, and his professional name or his website is Alypius Loft. Okay, so you may remember him. If you went to the website or to his online store, you saw that his artwork is beautiful. Well, if you remember when Emmanuel and I were talking, he was talking about his beautiful and fascinating wife. And I was like, let's get her on the program. And so tonight we get to meet Yam. Yam Burke is on the show tonight. Yam started out in Asia, and she ended up in the Deep South. So she's got quite a story. She, of course, comes from a long line of Thai Buddhists, actually, and she found her way to the Orthodox Church. So it's a pretty wonderful story, and she's a pretty neat person. So without any further ado, Yam, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me.
I'm so excited.
Out.
Oh, I'm thrilled. I'm excited to get a chance to meet you. And, of course, Emmanuel told me a little bit about you, and I was fired up. So I'm excited that you've come. So, okay. So I already know you were born in Thailand, right? Like, tell me about that. Where in Thailand and what is that like?
Yes. So I was born in Bangkok, the capital in Thailand.
Wow.
So big city. I think the population is maybe more than New York City. I can't remember the last time I
think
looked.
Maybe it's bustling, right?
Yeah,
like it's just huge and active.
Yes.
And oh, wow. Cool.
Yes.
Do you remember it? Do you remember Bangkok?
Yes.
Or were you just like, oh, cool.
I do. So I was there from birth through 6 years old. So I had kindergarten in Bangkok. I have memories of playing at the McDonald's in Bangkok, and there were like the ball pits, those.
Yep.
I think they took those away now at McDonald's, but yeah. And so because Bangkok is in near the equator, right? So it's really hot. So my mom would often take me to do things indoors because there's air conditioning.
So what you're saying is growing up in Bangkok is like growing up in Texas. Because that's what we are forced to do. We're like, what is air conditioned? What can we possibly do without collapsing after an hour?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, exactly. And my dad was teaching at a local university there, so he's often busy. So I have memories with both of them, and but a lot of my mom taking me places, and then of course memories in kindergarten and memories being around other relatives.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Did you have a big extended family in Bangkok?
So yes and no. So my mom's side, so my parents met when they were both in the universities there, and then they decided to stay for a while. But my mom's family is from Bangkok, but my dad's family is from Nong Khai, which is along the Mekong River, like along Laos, the country right above Thailand. And so it's not quite northern Thailand, like near China, but it's like a middle top. So my dad's family is from that area. But so yeah, so I got to see my aunt, a lot in Thailand. My mom's mom, and some other uncles, and yeah.
So some extended family. Was your dad from also a big city, or was it like more village on the river kind of?
No. Yeah, very
Nope.
rural.
Yeah.
So it's
Cool.
also touristy because it's along the Mekong River, and so Laos people come across over, right? And then a lot of expats come, like from Russia, Ukraine,
Really?
other. Yeah,
That's
so
always
there's.
so interesting to find out like which countries end up in which places, right? Like the Philippines has a lot of Germans apparently. Who knew? Like
Mhm.
who knew? So Russians and Ukrainians will find their way to Laos or to Thailand and sort of be up in that area.
And
That's
retire.
interesting.
Some even retire there. Yeah.
Well, there you go. I mean, I guess it's really cold in Russia. So they're just like, let's get down by the equator,
Hmm.
buy a nice retirement home on the river. That's so cool. All right. So how long were you in, like, at what point, how old were you when you left?
I was 6 years old. So it was the summer before first grade because I started first grade in the US. Um, and we came to the States because my dad was enrolled at Clemson University, which is in South Carolina. And he was in their food science technology program. Uh,
Cool.
so he was getting his PhD there, and spent a year there laying down the groundwork, like getting apartment, stuff set up for me and my mom. And I'm an only child, so it's just my mom and I, following after him after he finished the first year, and then we stayed with him until he finished the rest of his program. So for the next 3 years.
Wow. So when he went over to Clemson, it wasn't like, I'm going to go learn something and then bring it back to Thailand. It was like, I'm going to establish us in a new country, or what was his plan?
No, I'm sorry. So it was the first. So he was just like getting an apartment set up for us temporarily, right?
Right.
Right.
No, but
Yeah.
I
But
mean,
no.
and he was intending to go back home.
Yes. And he did. He had obligations to fulfill to the university there, to the Thai government who sponsored him. So he he finished his doctorate and then wanted to go back to teach farmers. He wanted to teach rural people about the new technology in the food science, in the agricultural world. So he wanted to bring those tools from the U.S. back to Thailand and share them and implement them. And
What a
he
wonderful
did.
thing. That's great.
Yeah, and he's still there. My dad lives now he lives in Nong Khai. He went back home to his hometown.
Wow. Okay. So, wow. All right. It's funny to me because whenever I ask that question, people always say, well, no, they were just moving to the US and they went to graduate school. And I'm like, when I was in graduate school, I met tons of people who came over from other countries, and the whole goal was like to bring back that information. So there you go. Finally, we found somebody. But that's neat. So when your dad went back, did you and your mom go with him, or did your mom decide to stay in the U.S.?
Right. So it's that population that you're talking about who decided to stay, right? So it was the wife of the student who decided to stay. So my mom fell in love with the U.S. She fell in love with the opportunities that America has for financial gain and for empowerment, socially, economically. So they, so at that point, my mom and my dad too had met my would-be stepdad in South Carolina. It's kind of funny. She met him at a yard sale. So my mom has been an entrepreneur at heart, and also blessed memory. So she's proposed already. But at that point, this was late 90s, almost 2000. she would, like, while my dad was in school, she would have yard sales. She had like, we just accumulated stuff, and then she would like sell it
Yeah.
at, I don't know if you know Winn-Dixie,
Oh,
it's an
yeah.
old grocery store that
Yeah.
is gone. So she would be in front of Winn-Dixie, or I should say in the back, like in their parking lot area, and with other people having yard sales. And
Yeah.
my would to be stepdad was one of those people walking by, and my mom hardly met a stranger. So she befriended him, and then they talked, and then she introduced him to my dad, and so they actually became friends. And so it just worked out where I think in hindsight, like, as an adult, I'm reflecting back on my childhood, and I think they were okay with that plan, where my mom wanted to stay. She wanted to give me an opportunity to have an American education. So she stayed with Charles, my stepdad. And then my dad went back to fulfill his obligations. And then sadly, they ended up getting a divorce, and they ended up remarrying different people. So my mom married Charles, and my dad married somebody else later, and his current wife. And so their stories went different paths.
Yeah. They diverged. So from your perspective though, as a kid, right? Because you're like 8 years old, 9 years old, when was your understanding more just sort of national, like not knowing so much about what's happening in the inner workings of their relationship, but more just kind of like, well, dad has to go back to Thailand and mom really likes it here, so we're going to stay here. And then dad just did never come back from Thailand, and you guys never went back, and that's how it works out, right?
Yes. Yeah. There were like immigration complications too, right? So my dad, he came on a student visa. So we came on like as a tag along on his student visa.
Right.
So his student visa, our visas expired. So then it was that, big question mark of like, well, how are we going to stay here, and make it? And so my mom, when her marriage with Charles, and they had, they were, like very kind and close with each other, but she recognized that, like, oh, this is again, like an entrepreneurship, kind of like, oh, this is like an opportunity, like it's working out. I want to be here. And Charles, he's an American citizen, and so we thought that would be the path, but it actually turned out that for us to stay here, that with immigration stuff, we ended up getting our permanent residency or green cards much later. So, it was very interesting
So
as a child.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple questions. One, did your mom already speak English before she came over, or did she have to learn when she was here?
She had to learn.
Wow. Your mom's brave. I mean, that is really, like, for her to just decide, nope, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to figure it out. Right? Like there's no obvious pathway forward, but it's just going to she's going to figure it out. But so that's part of why she had to be an entrepreneur though, right? Like, do you think if she could have, she would have preferred to get a job, but she couldn't have because she didn't have like the Social Security number? And
yeah, exactly. I think that's why she did side gigs. Like she taught Thai cooking classes. She ended up helping my stepdad a little bit. He worked in the meat department at different grocery stores, and so she would assist him when she could. And but yeah, she was a homemaker mostly, took care of me, and yeah.
Wow, that's neat. So as a kid, did you feel the stress of that, of the sort of the problem of the immigration paperwork not really being in place? Like, how did you handle that as a little kid?
Oh gosh. Well, I was so thankful that along my journey so I was in public school this whole time, right? And I made friends, and my friends' parents were really, really kind. And so they just helped my mom along the way. And along with some other friendships, my mom befriended this older American couple who ended up being like grandparents to me. I call them Mimi and Papa. And my papa, he's actually reposed last year. But they helped my mom and Charles raise me. So I would go to their house on weekends. And they had other grandkids too. So I would play with their other grandkids. But I was really blessed to have these friendships and relationships that God brought into our lives. So
they weren't related to Charles. They're just like people who.
No. So God
is good, right? He provides, it's like here you are without family and people just kind of show up. Thank God, because that's a hard place to be.
It is, as an immigrant. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So my mom was in a store and I was with her, and she was looking at some clothes and I was like playing with some toys, and she heard this older couple, my Mimi and Papa, talk about like this clothing and just like looking through it. And it was actually, I think it was Toys R Us. They had like a small clothing section, but she she just overheard their conversation. And she actually went over to them and she was trying to explain to them that they can get a cheaper jacket, like a girl's, like kids jacket at Old Nary. And she kept saying that. And then they just kind of looked at her and, tried to make up like what was going on. And they were very, like, I don't know, Southern hospitality is like a real thing. And so they were very polite. And so she she felt that she could not get her point across. And so she got me. And at that point, I had already been integrated into the American public schools. And so my English was like pretty good. And so I was often her translator. So she asked me to come over. And I was like, oh, she means Old Navy. Like she thinks that you should go check out Old Navy for a better deal on this jacket. And so they were trying to get a jacket for their granddaughter, who's my age. And the next thing they know, or we know, they're inviting us over to their chicken farm in Northeast Georgia, because they run commercial chicken farms as their livelihood. And so that's how it all got started, was that my mom was trying to help them find a better deal, and their Southern hospitality opened the door to actually how I ended up becoming a Christian in the Baptist world.
Wow. So they were Christian. They were Baptists. Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Gosh, how beautiful. I mean, it's always a good thing. I feel like as Christians, we are supposed to be befriending the stranger and the person who has just sort of shown up, it's just there. And it's always heartening to find out that some of us are actually doing that. So thank God. But so for you, though, as a kid, right? So your dad is just sort of off in Thailand, doesn't come back. How were you about that? I mean, this is a really hard thing, but it's also so far away. Like, how did you make sense of that, I guess, is the question as a kid? How did you sort that out?
Well, as a kid, my framework was always that, my dad left us. Like, we were here and he abandoned us. And so it was just a lot of sorrows. But at the same time, like, he kept in touch with my mom, like through phone. And, back in the early 2000s, like Skype was not big yet, right? Like video chat was not big. And so it was mostly like phone calls, and, you had to buy like a phone card to make international calls. And then anyway, so yeah, just go back to your question. I just felt just really like broken that like he's not here, and if we left to go to Thailand, we couldn't come back easily because of our immigration issues. So we knew, or my mom knew that, if we left, then that's it. Like, we give up. Right. And so we stayed, and her goal was for me to finish high school. Like, that was her one of her main goals. And so as an adult, in processing my parents' relationship and decisions, I realized, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I think it was my mom who left. I was like, whoa. it was the original plan for all of us to return to Thailand so that he could advance in his career, continue giving back to Thailand, to farmers, to university students, to his people, to our people. My mom was like, hold up. No, I'm, switching things up. So yeah, that's really more in recent years. And I have a good relationship with my dad now. I'm so thankful. We video chat about once a month. And I send him photos of our kids. And he, and I've visited him too. We've went back. He's met our oldest. Anyways, and so, yeah, so in hindsight, it's like, oh, wow, like my mom left, but it didn't feel like that as a kid because she was always present. Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a way, that's probably good, right? Because then you would have grown up, like it's easier to be mad at the person who's not right there than the one person that you rely on, right? So like if you were really fully understanding that, like, Mom, what did you do? That would be, I would imagine, maybe more damaging as a little kid. So maybe that's just, maybe you're protected in that way and you just really didn't fully apprehend it. And then, but I think that's often the case, as kids, we make sure that the coast is clear to love the people we have to love. And then when we have our own kids, like all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, what did you do? And you can then sort of enter into conversation with it in your own head. But wow. Okay. So it's, and I mean, that's hard. That's your dad's so far away. I hate that for you, really. You know what I mean? That it's hard.
Thank you.
But, but I'm glad that you guys were able to create a community here. So thank God for that it would have been, I think, a lot worse if that had not happened. So you mentioned that you had some Christians who sort of just invited you over to the chicken farm. And before you know it, they're like grandparents to you. How did they just sort of start taking you guys to church, or and what was that like for your mom was Buddhist, right? And so you were Buddhist as a kid. Yes. And was she like really sort of devout and sort of, I don't know, spiritually involved with Buddhism, or was it more like, oh yeah, I come from a Buddhist country?
It's more of like a backdrop. In Thailand, I think it's like the stats are like 9 out of 10 people are Buddhist. It's everybody's Buddhist. And so when she came to the States, I have memories of my parents taking us to the temples in South Carolina, in Georgia, the Buddhist temples there. And so they were like plugged in a little bit with Buddhism. But so our journey to the Christian faith actually started in my second grade year. So my parents were still together. I had a friend who was a pastor's kid at a Wesleyan church, and she invited me to Wednesday night church services and also Sundays, but I didn't go on Sundays because you had to wake up early. And I'm like, oh. and my parents weren't going, so I was like, oh. But on Wednesday nights, like there were lots of like fun kid stuff, and the church was in walking distance from our apartment. And so my parents allowed me to go with my friend since it's nearby. And so that's the very first time I heard about Jesus. And over the course of, I think it was like a year of going to these Wednesday night services, I learned, I was like, oh, okay, like Jesus died, okay, for my sins. I was like, okay, so I have sins. It's like all these like new compartments, this new like theology for a child, for second grader, that I was just kind of like, oh, okay. And then there's something about like a free gift, because as a kid,
I like free
love
gifts.
presents. Yeah, I like gifts. And so I was like, okay, like he gave us a gift. Like I remember that being in this Christmas play too. And I think my parents came for those like special events, but usually I think for them it was a break, right? Like I would go to church and they would get a break from taking care of me. And so I think, anyways, so going back to like, oh, okay, like free gift. Okay. So, Jesus gives us his life. Oh, okay. Like this is getting kind of like big. And so that was like the foundational work for me for Christianity. And at that time, my parents were still like, Buddhist, and just that's part of their culture. They're even as immigrants or temporary immigrants, international students, family. But then when I was, after my parents had split and my mom had befriended this American couple, my Mimi and Papa, they were the ones who took me to Sunday morning services at their Baptist church. And so then that relationship with them helped integrate me more into like a church family. And so my mom and my stepdad were not attending, but they were happy that I was going with Mimi and Papa. And so, yeah, so that's where as a like preteen, I was getting into like 10, 11, 12 years old of age. That's around the time I made a profession of faith and received baptism at their Baptist church in Georgia.
Well, that's neat. That's really neat. Well, I'm sure that the youth ministry workers at the Wesleyan Church were just thrilled because it's like the dream, right? Like, yes, someone who has never, ever even heard of Jesus, and we get to introduce her. And it's like, that's I'm sure they were thrilled. But
yes.
No, that's really beautiful, though. It's really, and it's nice that there was not pressure for that to happen soon, and that you were able to spend a number of years kind of easing in and trying to make sense of it. Like you say, it's a totally different frame of reference, right? To start thinking about, well, what do you mean sin and salvation? Like, saved from what? What are you talking about? There's really a lot there. And I think we take that for granted if we grow up in a Western culture, because we all know that language of sin, whether we're raised in it or not, we've all heard it. But, okay, well, that's really interesting. That's really neat. I love that.
Yes. Yeah. It's really like that was my coming of age story, right? Like I was coming into my own, like starting to feel like, oh, I can be independent in some areas and have, autonomy. And my parents, I think, and even my stepdad too, like they saw that these were good things. Like I had good influences, and there were, these like parameter, like benefits, right, of becoming a Christian. And so everybody was supportive in my circle, my family circle. So.
Yeah. Well, and your mom too, it seems like, because she was so quick to embrace America, because a lot of times in an immigrant family, there's a lot of pressure to behave like you're still at home, right? Like I have to raise you Thai or Greek or whatever, right? Like where it's like we need to replicate the old culture in this house and then also somehow be able to go back and forth with this new culture. But it sounds like your mom was pretty eager to get to just all the American things. Like, let's just do it.
Yes. That's a really good point, Lisa. There were some things that she just taught me that were Thai, like manners and values. But yes, for the most part, the majority, it was very much an assimilation into the American culture.
Well, there you go. All right. We are going to take a very short break, and then we'll be back with Yam Burke. We'll see you soon.
The existence of fools for Christ in the Orthodox tradition mystifies many people, even some within the Orthodox Church itself. People often wonder what purpose these sometimes comical and oftentimes tragically misunderstood saints serve in the life of the Church, especially given their unconventional and seemingly bizarre behaviors. In Holy Fools by Oswin Creighton, we begin to gain a better understanding of these saints' curious manner of serving Christ as we learn about the extraordinary lives of 20 of the most well-known fools for Christ in a series of brief hagiographies. Available now at store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
to Everyday Orthodox. Tonight we are speaking with Yam Burke. And I mentioned at the top of the hour here, Yam is the wife of Emmanuel Burke, who was on this show. And I just want to mention something before we get back to Yam's story, because I know I'm going to get completely fascinated by your story and not get to it. So Emmanuel had mentioned that he was working on a really cool project, and he couldn't tell us what it was. But I know that now it's public. And I'll tell you before you even look. So this is, no, you can hold it. It's so beautiful, the cover. So there's a new book from Ancient Faith. It is called Holy Fools. And it has this icon on the front. And I looked at it and I was like, oh, that's Emmanuel's. This is the book he was working on. Because I could just see his style in it. And it's so beautiful. And it's just, and so there are more icons inside the book as well, right? Look at that. Look at that. Yeah. So if you're on YouTube, you get to see it. If you're not on YouTube, my apologies, but the icons are awesome. And you can go to alypiusloft.com. It's ALYPIUS LOFT, Alypius Loft, and search him and go look at his icons. They're beautiful. They're really neat. They're really, really cool. But okay, I want to get back to your story though, yeah, because it really is like, what a fascinating thing. And a difficult thing, but also so many just blessings along the path for you, as you're coming through, because really that could be a really lonely thing to come in. You don't speak English. Before long, Dad's gone, and it's really you and Mom against the world. And my mom actually immigrated with her mother when she was about 10, and they didn't speak English, and it was rough, but they were a little more alone. And your mom, it seems, was good at bringing people into the picture and connecting with people and making friends. So as a little kid, so you're struggling through and sort of dealing with this idea that Dad left, but also, like, what were you interested in doing? What were you into? Like, what did you love when you were a little kid?
I feel like a typical girl's life. I enjoyed playing with Barbies. As an only child, I often, imaginative play. Like we didn't have iPads, we had like Game Boys. So I played Game Boys. I watched a lot of Pokemon. I was into art. And so I like to paint, like to draw. I like to play with the neighborhood kids. We lived in an apartment complex. And so I would go outside and play on the playground with the other neighborhood kids. I as an only child, I for many years, I have, in a way, I still kind of do, but I wanted a sibling. Like I specifically wanted a sister.
Yes.
And then specifically, I wanted and this was, I was like, 8, 9, 10 years old. I wanted a twin sister.
Yes. Although, my kids have been like that. They'll be like 10 years old and they're like, I want a sister and she should be 7. And you're like, like the ship has sailed, man. Like the twin sister, though, that's even worse, right? Like that is truly,
yes. I wanted an identical twin sister, right? Because like Parent Trap was like really big, right? Like Lindsay Lohan, like that came out around that time. And so I was like,
so funny.
Oh yeah. And then also one of my close friends was an identical twin. And so I was like, oh man, like I'm missing out.
Right. Well, I guess you were in a way, but most of us are, so it's okay. That's funny. That is very funny. So were you thinking like maybe when you grew up, you'd be an artist? What do you think you wanted to do?
Yes. So I did. I thought I would become an artist. I was getting like good feedback from art teachers. I was getting like awards in elementary school and middle school, and then even into high school. That building up or influence from teachers really helped shape my art interest and skills. And then also I remember as a kid, this is again, upper elementary school age, or maybe middle elementary school age, I wanted to be a cashier. So when I went to the grocery stores with my mom, I liked the sound of the ding, 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 ka-ching, and like money would come out.
Right? I mean, there's a reason they make cashier toys for kids, right? It's a fascinating machine. That's awesome. Yeah, I always felt like I'd be really good at memorizing all the codes for the vegetables. I was like, that's right. Bananas are 4011. I know that. I'd be great at this. Like type it in a little. I'm with you. I feel like that's kind of a dream come true, actually. That's so funny. Okay, so when you get into high school and you're going through, what were you thinking at this point now? So you've got sort of your grandparents and your mom and your stepdad. So you've got a community, and then you've become a Baptist. You're in the church there. What were you thinking you wanted to do once you? Because I mean, mom just wanted you to get through high school, right? So you're about to accomplish the lifelong goal. You're done. Now you're all set. So what was next?
Yes. So there were a lot of question marks, and I had, this is like one of the most beautiful themes, in my life that I'm just like so grateful for. Like each part of my journey, there were caring adults. There were people who, we had teachers, we had the grandparents, we had relatives, but there's always one, another woman, or, another, like just wonderful set of like a family or couple that just poured into our lives or were intentional about caring for me. And in high school, my or then also like friends' parents. I had such great friends' parents of my friends were so great. Like with the sleepovers and they're just counseling. But my high school science teacher, or one of them, Miss Spokes, she introduced me to art therapy. So I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that counseling and like the therapy world could involve visual arts. So that was, brand new door for me. And she gave me a book about it, and I looked into I looked into colleges that offered an art therapy program for their bachelor's. And actually one of them is in South Carolina. So it was just like a 2-hour drive from us, from home. And we ended up visiting, ended up falling in love with the school. But then there was always a question mark of like, how am I going to afford this? Like, how is this going to happen? Because my friends were graduating and they were going to college, like, they were going to stay on campus, etc. But at that point, I still didn't have a green card. And so
I was going to say, wait a minute, so without a green card, generally, I think colleges will let you in, right? Because they're like, we're not here to worry about that.
I think public and private have different standards, right?
Okay.
And so this was a private school. And so they knew that we were close, just because we were missing some documents from my mom's side, like a birth certificate in like the original birth certificate and etc. But they worked with us. And I had looked at another college too that had an art program, but they didn't have art therapy. And so this one, in Spartanburg, South Carolina, they were the closest art therapy program. And so when we visited and we explained our situation to the admissions counselors, they pointed us in some, scholarship opportunities. And it turned out, glory be to God, they awarded me a full ride for tuition for 4 years. And so we were like, wow, like this is clearly a gift from God. And I only had to pay for room and board if I wanted to stay on campus, and which that made the most sense because we were so far away. The commute was not realistic. So we paid, again, with the help of family, we paid for room and board year by year. But I was able to complete the art therapy program there, had a great experience, gained wonderful tools for my next vocation or my vocation. It was just really like we could see God's kindness, his love, his grace in just moving me along.
Well, and it feels like truly just like, meeting sort of the grandparent couple, right? Or like all along there are people coming in and your friends' families, and, that God is sort of providing through community and through other people for you. And then he provides this as well. So when you say we could see God's hand in it, do you mean your mom could see God's hand in it? Like, was your mom kind of
yes
easing into this Christian mentality?
She was. And we, by we, like, I guess it's so funny. They're just like different friends and different people in different seasons of my life. And so I think it was, I'm trying to even think. It was, I can't remember who. Somebody suggested getting my mom a Thai Bible. And so I was like, oh okay, I can do that. And so, and so I went online and I'm like, how did we get this Thai Bible, for her? I think it's maybe this other Thai, American couple that we had loosely met through another connection, but they were Christians, and so we bought my mom a Thai English Bible, like her second Bible, and so I started reading the Bible with my mom, and like we read through the book of John, or the Gospel of St. John, and she was also getting influenced by my stepfather as well, and the Christian faith, and he was supportive, and so she passed away. She reposed in 2015. It was a month after our first child was born. So he was Micaiah, my oldest. He was a month old, and she passed away. When she had passed, she was just very acknowledging of Jesus, of God's goodness in our lives, and his gifts. Yeah.
Well, that is so reassuring, as family, to know that, because we don't always know someone's internal spiritual direction and what's going on inside. And it's always a blessing when someone is passing and makes those things clear to us. But right after you had your first child, so your mom saw your wedding and she met her grandson. No, she didn't. You got a look on your face like, no.
Yeah, that's another sorrowful point. I'm sorry. Actually was in the hospital on my wedding day.
Oh, but she saw that you were married. You know what I mean? Like she saw.
Yes.
In a sense, she was able to see you and see what direction your life was. She loved
Emmanuel. Yes.
Thank God.
She was very supportive. She met his family, my in-laws. Like, she was very like, okay, like, I think a part of her passing was that because she passed a year after we had been married. And so I think a part of, this is my interpretation, is that as she was passing or in declining health, I think she recognized that I was going to be okay. Like, her only child, her her girl, like, was going to be safe. So it was really,
well, I mean,
really
especially,
a gift.
raising you on her own, right? Like she had a lot of personal responsibility for your welfare. And so that is an important and beautiful thing, that she was able to see that you were going to be okay and you had done well for yourself. So thank God for that. And may her memory be eternal.
Yes. Thank you.
Gosh. Okay. So how'd you meet Emmanuel?
Yeah. So we were 19. We were at a summer camp in Western North Carolina. We were both camp counselors, and amongst like 90 other counselors. Like, it's a pretty big camp, and they run like 3 months, 2.5, 3 months gamut. And so we became friends, and then we just stayed in touch after camp ended. Started dating a couple of years later, and then we got married a couple of years after that. So in 2014.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, good. And so, okay. So did you become an art therapist?
Good question.
I just realized, I'm like, wait, you studied art therapy. Were you doing art therapy? What were you doing?
Right. So in order to practice art therapy, you have to get your master's.
Okay.
And so after I finished college, I was at like a fork in the road. I was like, okay, like, do I pursue graduate school? And these graduate schools are often in multiple states away, like in Washington, D.C., in California. It's just going to be far away from what I knew as home in the South, in South Carolina and Georgia. And so at that time in my senior year, I had already started dating Emmanuel my senior year. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I could just pause on graduate studies because I was also feeling kind of burnt out from schooling. And there was this opportunity to do a fellowship program. It's called the Fellows Program, where you get to have a paid internship and live with a host family and be plugged into the local church there. And so again, like more supportive, like gap year measures. And so that program was really appealing to me because then it could give me time to be closer to Emmanuel too, right? Geographically, because he was in the area in North Carolina. And so I was like, oh, okay. And this would give me time to like grow up more, like to get a driver's license, to practice reconciling my checkbook, to have a job and like to have these like new adult responsibilities.
Right.
And so it's
by
really
then,
good.
did you have your green card? Were you
Yes.
so you were able to do, so the paperwork came through and now you can do all those things. Oh, wow. So now it's...
Yeah, I think it came through like my end of my junior year, beginning of senior year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then you could get a driver's license and you could get a job and you could do all the things. That's neat. Okay. So during this year, you're living with the host family. Again, like you just have this way of like finding family everywhere. It's beautiful. Thank God. Thank God for that. Okay. So,
and we still keep in touch with them. Like it's been 10 years, and we're still close to them. They have 4 boys. Now we have 3 boys. And so it's like something in the water.
You're like, I was in that house for 1 year and look what happened. I became a mom of boys, but that's beautiful though. So just at what point did you guys find Orthodoxy? How does that happen? Because it feels like you were both really settled in your faith and there's a way that in church, we don't want to lose the kids, right? So we try to build all these structures to keep them in, and they had the structures going, right? They had you guys at camp. You met somebody else in the same faith. You've got the host family. They're like reinforcing it. How did you end up falling through the cracks? Like what happened?
Yeah. I know. I think our Baptist pastors have asked the same thing. I think they actually asked Emmanuel, like, how did this happen?
No, it's true. People spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to keep the kids, like not just with Jesus, but like in that specific spot. What happened?
Yeah. So I describe it as, I'm from the East, right? From Southeast Thailand or Asia, from the East. So I came to the West, and now I'm back in the East. But this time it's an eternal East, right? It's the kingdom of God. It's the faith that's been practiced 2,000 years. So it started with Emmanuel. I'm trying to just kind of summarize, but we actually went from Baptist to Anglican. So I think the internet has a lot to do with it, right? A lot of Googling, a lot of researching, and then like finding resources, like reading books. So we crossed the bridge from Southern Baptist to Anglican. And we were really happy as Anglicans. We loved our priests, loved the new way of worshiping and
liturgy,
having ties. Having ties to historical Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The liturgy.
Was it C.S. Lewis that brought you guys to the Anglican Church? Just out of curiosity, like
it's actually N.T. Wright.
Okay. There you go. There you go. I'm like,
a controversial figure. Yeah.
Oh, you know.
And then another Scott McKnight. I think he wrote
Okay.
it was another book that Emmanuel read. But anyway, so we became Anglican, and then COVID happened, right? So the pandemic happened, and we were driving 45 minutes to our parish, and so we wanted to be first of all, we wanted to be part of like our local zip code community. Like we didn't want to drive 45 minutes. And so it turns out that there was an Orthodox parish that we had become friends with the priest. And so that's where our parish is now. And at that point, the house we were living at, it was within walking distance. Again, this is a good theme to going back to like when I was in second grade, walking distance to the Wesleyan church. So now it's walking distance to the Orthodox church. And so we started visiting, and fell in love. Fell in love with the engaging of our five senses. And at that point, I was learning about Christian monasticism from our Anglican background and the early church fathers. And so my patron saint is Saint Macrina the Elder. She's the grandmother of Saint Basil the Great and Saint Macrina the Younger. And so all these introductions that were happening for us just led us to a big open door for the Orthodox community and the faith.
How lovely. Wow. So you were Anglican when the first two boys were born, or how did that?
Yes. And so they were baptized. So they received baptism as Anglicans. So then our third is the only one that's has been baptized.
Everybody else is chrismated and received. And gosh, how lovely though. That's really cool. It is really interesting. I think Anglican, and that's also sometimes Western Rite, although Western Rite, of course, is Orthodox, functions in this way too, where it's like sort of easier to take that middle step where you first get used to liturgy and sacrament, but it still sort of sounds familiar. And then you take the full leap over to Orthodoxy, which, doesn't sound familiar, but is beautiful, of course.
And our parish is a mission parish, St. Anthony the Great. So we're part of the American Carpatho-Rusin Diocese, and our priest, it's a very small diocese, but our priest is able to have a pan-Orthodox ethos with the parish. And so we have Greeks who are attending, we have people who from Russian backgrounds, we have mostly just converts, just Americans. So it's a really sweet community.
That's neat. I love a mission parish because you really have to get involved. Like you can't really sit on the sidelines at a mission because it's like, listen, we don't have anyone baking bread or singing in the choir or making lunch, and like you just have to do something, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I think it's so good though when you first convert to come into a parish like that, because they'll put you to work and you'll start to.
They will. I learned how to bake prosphora. Like when I was a catechumen, I was learning, and then when we were chrismated, I was like, oh, now I can bake prosphora, and now I serve on the parish council, on the advisory board, just because it's a small community, and so yes, they do put you to work.
They do. And it's really a blessing, especially coming in, I think, as a young family, because you have a lot of energy and it's easy to get distracted and be pulled in different directions. But with a mission parish, it's kind of like everybody has to be all in. And so it's good. I think it's really a good thing. I love that. And I love the Carpatho-Russians in general. Mm-hmm. Like it's just a neat, your Bishop Gregory and everybody there, just wonderful church. How nice. So is it mostly in English then, or all in English maybe even?
It's like 98% English. Our choir director, when he is there, he has just the Holy God, Holy Mighty, Holy Immortal in different languages. And he normally, and we've had Arabic speakers, a couple from I think Lebanon, and when they've been there, he's added their language. And so it's just, he's attentive to who's present.
That's so neat. That's really interesting because I've never, like that particular hymn, I've never heard anybody do that in various languages. And I would like that very much. I would love that hymn. That's neat. Oh, cool. I love that. Well, okay. So how old is your youngest son right now?
So he is almost a year old. So he'll be a year at the end of October. It's like 11 months.
Okay. So what did you think, like having your first versus having your second versus having your third? I was just talking to somebody who's pregnant with her third today. So I'm curious if you agree with my assessment. So what do you think? Which one was the hardest one? And like, how does it go?
Oh yeah, definitely going from 1 to 2 was a lot harder than 2 to 3. And a large part of that too is because our older two are 8 and 6, right? So when we had Amos, Micaiah was 2 years old. So, we're still in the throes of potty training and all of that jazz. So when Simeon came along, the boys, Amos, he had already started kindergarten. And now he's in first grade, now. So they're like elementary school age and more independent. So that
they can get their own snacks while you're feeding the baby and stuff. I mean, that's a big deal, right? Or like, could you run and grab me a diaper? Yes, they can.
Yes.
It's amazing.
Yes. And our oldest, our 8-year-old, he helps feed Simeon oatmeal. Like when I'm like, I need to take care of the dishes, can you just feed your baby brother? And he's,
it's very nice. And it's good for the kids.
Very kind.
So that, was that one of your goals, was to have more than one, perhaps twins? Maybe if you could possibly give someone a twin.
Yes, we've wanted a large family. My husband has 2 younger siblings. I had no siblings, and so we love family. And so when we first got married, we actually thought on the number 3 to 5.
I love the range. That was me too. I always had a range. I was like, I don't have a specific number. It's just, there's a range. We'll know when we get there. That's beautiful. So are you still thinking 3 to 5, or are you at one of those moments where you're like, nope, that's enough?
Maybe a 4th. I feel like if we have a 4th, we'll have a boy. It's always 50-50, but it's like, okay, like, let's just kind of take things step by step. And
Well, thank God. What a beautiful thing, and what a wonderful family. And again, congratulations to Emmanuel on the illustrations for Holy Fool. Yes. It works out so beautifully that you're here just as this book has come out, because we were talking to him about it and he couldn't tell us the name. He couldn't tell us what he had done. So it's very cool.
Yes.
But I love his artwork. Do you also do art still?
I have, before I was pregnant with Simeon, our youngest, I got back into ceramics. So I'd taken a ceramics class. Yeah, I love the tactile experience. I think that went very well in how I was processing life and orthodoxy, and just engaging all of my senses. And so with the clay, I was able to, and then the glazing process, like everything, just to be able to really use my hands and my other senses. But it's been beautiful to have that as a small hobby.
That's good. That's very good. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's just delightful to get to know you. This has been great.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me.
It's a pleasure. And then thank you to our audience. Thank you for joining us. And please come back next Sunday night and we will get to know another everyday Orthodox Christian. Good night.